It's a pleasure to be with you here again. I've really been enjoying this series. I think the main thing for me is enjoying how engaged people are in this exploration, and I really appreciate any comments, questions, elaboration on what we discuss. And so I'm gonna again show you quite a few verses, and tonight, of course, we're talking about the beautiful and the unbeautiful, and how we see things, may see something as beautiful, which really has a we'll see in the suttas and in the poetry, a concern for the danger in it if we don't see the sort of unbeautiful side as well. And even our perception can be very different depending upon our views and our kind of attitudes or conditioning. And one example that I've faced in my own life as a bhikkhuni is that, when one, especially more for a woman than a man, if you shave your head, it's definitely for the most part, a very unusual thing for a woman to do. And there are people like me, before I did that really saw it as beautiful. I'd see nuns with their shaved heads and their robes, and I was inspired and just really thought it was such a beautiful thing. But there are other people who find it incredibly ugly. I actually was introduced to a relative of my relatives once who couldn't look at me. He would glance and he would look away. You could see the disgust, and it's interesting. It's interesting what our perceptions create for us. And so we're going to be looking at that and just looking in general at cause and effect. The Buddha really took, what is the result of this? What are the causes? What are the effects? And how does this play out over time? So we'll just get started. I'm going to share the screen. We're taking ugliness as beauty, or, the way the Vipallāsas are described, as we saw in our first meeting together. When we think something is beautiful, but it's not, that's when we're under the distortion of perception. But when we see the beautiful is beautiful and the ugly is ugly, then we know, or at least we see the reality of it, both sides. So this first verse is from the monk, the bhikkhu Ayya. And it's in the Therigatha, the monks' inspired verses of the enlightened monks, and it's one verse, and it's the 98th one in the list of verses. And so he says, when you see a sight, mindfulness is lost as you focus on a pleasant feature. Experiencing it with a mind full of desire, you keep clinging to it. Your defilements grow, leading to the root of rebirth. So there's a few really important points here. The one is this emphasis on mindfulness being lost. So when we see something we're really attracted to, and we focus on the aspect of it that we're really attracted to, we lose our mindfulness. So now, we in the world, we especially in Buddhist circles, talk about mindfulness a lot, but actually, of course, the whole world seems to be talking about mindfulness in a lot of different ways. But how often do we think of it like this, that to be mindful of, you might say, both sides of something. So when we get excited about something and we see it, and this could be anything, this could be excitement for having the new house or the new car or the new job or whatever it is, and that excitement causes us to not see the other side of it. And then here he's talking about we lose our mindfulness. We're not really circumspect. We're not really patient. We're not really calm. And we have a mind, the mind becomes full of desire as we're clinging to this thing we see, as we cling to the sight, and desire grows. Defilements, what are those defilements that grow? That greed, maybe aversion or hatred toward anything getting in between us and what we want, or that kind of thing. And that this is the kind of craving that powers us, powers or fuels our energy towards being reborn when we die. And this is why there's a little common saying at Karuna Buddhist Vihara, wow, that's beautiful, but I'm not coming back for that. You'll hear this frequently, and maybe I'm just thinking about the maple trees going golden in the autumn in the forest where we are. It's stunning. Right now, the creeks are rushing, and it's just incredibly beautiful. And nature is wonderful in that it's possible to really love it, but you don't have that kind of passion for it that you might have for someone that you think is really attractive, say. It's got a different feeling to it, and yet we'll often say, but I'm not coming back for that. So it's like keeping our mindfulness going. Anybody have any comments, thoughts, questions? I can't see everyone because of the sharing, so if you raise your computer hand, it'll pop up that you want to say something. And if not, that's totally fine. We'll go on to the next one. This is Lakuntaka Bhadya Bhikkhu, another monk. This translation is a little bit of both of the book we've been using, the Voices of the Enlightened Monks, and also some from Bhante Sujato. And it says the monk's name is Bhadya. He lives in a beautiful forest monastery called Ambataka. Ambataka means it's a mango, it's the wild mango monastery. Having uprooted craving, he meditates there happily. To enjoy themselves, some people need drums, lutes, and cymbals, but I don't need any of those. I am sitting at the foot of this tree, delighting in the path of the Buddha. If the Buddha were to grant me one wish, and I were to get what I wish for, I'd choose for the whole world constant mindfulness of the body. Now just think about that. Here again, and this particular verse was translated this way by Bhante Sujato, and I had to put it in here because the one that was in the translation by Gyanananda didn't really make a lot of sense to me. And this is really right on point. This is to wish for the whole world to have constant mindfulness of the body, to really see the body the way it is, to be aware. And then what would that lead to? We wouldn't be, well, he'll carry it on here. Some people make fun of me when looking at my physical appearance. So apparently this monk wasn't the most handsome in the world. Some people make fun of him when they look at his physical appearance. But others get carried away by my sweet voice. Both groups are captured by desire and passion, and both don't know who I am, really. They don't know who I really am. And think about it, when we see someone, when we hear something, when we hear someone's voice, if we're really, if we're carried away by that, we don't know them. We don't know what's really there. So they don't see my internal life. nor do they see my external life. Those foolish people are obstructed all around. They're just carried away only by my voice, not knowing what's inside, but seeing what's outside, seeing the fruit outside. So I imagine that maybe they see that he's a good monk and they see the good results of that. They're also carried away by a voice. Understanding what's inside and seeing what's outside, those of unobstructed vision don't get carried away by a voice. And I think there are several, or maybe there's more ways to apply this, like when are we carried away by what someone's telling us, carried away by the sound of the voice, but maybe also carried away by what they're saying, without seeing, really seeing them, or without understanding. And what's understanding what's inside the body when we're attracted to someone. So I like this one because it's not just talking about the body, it's talking about, how we're captivated by sense input, impressions, perceptions, and then we don't really see things the way they are. Any comments, questions? So here we have, okay, Matthew, yes?
So I understand there seems to be the idea here to arrest a pleasant feeling, but what about an unpleasant feeling?
It's the same, right?
hmm I would think so, but
Yeah,
a lot of the suttas seem to really spend most of their time talking about sense contact in a positive manner, and then it's our responsibility to keep that in perspective. And I maybe you have some suggestion, or maybe this isn't the forum, but I haven't really found a good sutta that talks about it, in a negative way, and then how to approach that. So maybe.
yeah. I mean, of course, the desire for things to draw them close to us is probably a bit more common, but it's the same thing when we want to push things away. And I think it actually gets mentioned in some of these verses for tonight. That's my sense, that's my kind of vague recollection. But I think when we think about how do I deal with that aversion, I think we can do it a lot in the same way, to really come back to what it feels like and to come back to looking at where that comes from. Like, people tell me they're really averse to certain kinds of insects. I know this may not seem like a very compelling example, but there's this insect called silverfish. I don't know if you have them where you live, but just last week, I think two different people were like, yeah, I really don't kill anything, but boy, those silverfish, they just disgust me. And now they're totally harmless. And, like, what do we do with that aversion? And I know the feeling, because when I first came in contact with those particular little insects, it was kind of a like, ooh, you kind of draw back. For some reason, it has a little bit of a ooky feeling. But it's like, well, then you start looking at, well, why? Like, what's the problem? Last night I found the tiniest spider on the quilt, the comforter on my bed, and it was like it had a little web on the fabric, and I couldn't even quite tell. It looked like maybe a little fuzz of something. I was like, but then I think it's a spider, and I took something and I like moved the web, and I could see it's a little tiny spider. Well, this little being has way more to worry about engaging with me than I do with it. But it's, ugh. I don't want to get bitten by a spider, no matter how tiny it is, it still seems. Anyway, I gently took it outside. But it's like, yeah, we have aversion, sometimes much stronger aversion. And if we look at it, it's the flip side, it's the other side of the coin. And we can handle the feelings in the same way as the desire, as the lust, as the craving. It's a craving to get rid of. You know, bhavatanha, vibhavatanha. It's just, am I gonna get pulled around by my perceptions and my feelings and my thoughts, or am I gonna think thoughts that keep building up this feeling, or am I going to unpack that, observe it as I feel it in the body? So I would apply the same approach. Now, when I say that, it's like, when there's strong lust, and we're going to see what the approach here is that Venerable Ananda recommends in this sutta here. And you think, well, then I look at the unbeautiful. So when we have disgust, do we look at the beautiful? Maybe, seeing, maybe that's helpful. Or maybe it's like looking at, where's my disgust rooted? What am I afraid of? Or what am I kind of conditioned to dislike, and why? Anyway, I think it's the same as what we need to do with whatever other reaction we have. Does that sound reasonable, Matthew?
Yes, I'm listening very closely and processing what you're saying. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Now let's see if we have, I think there might be something in here with at least the flip side mentioned. Okay, this short sutta is from the Samyutta Nikaya in the Book of Eights, which is the Vangisa Samyutta. It's a whole little series of poems, actually, mostly, and stories about Venerable Vangisa. Now, Venerable Vangisa was a poet. He was an extremely gifted creator of verse. And I'm not going to show you his verses in the Therigatha because it is really long, really long. And he was very, he could just, like, he'd say to the Buddha, I have this inspiration, these verses are arising in me, and the Buddha would say, go ahead, and he'd be like just ad-libbing, beautiful verses. And a lot of them were with the praise and the sort of glorification of the Buddha. It was quite sweet. But here he's a monk. He also had a certain amount of pride for a while in his talent at poetry. But here, Venerable Ananda they're staying in Savatthi, and in the morning, going out for alms, and Venerable Vangisa was coming along as a junior monk or second monk to Venerable Ananda. And at that time, Venerable Vangisa became dissatisfied with being celibate, I guess, and lust infected his mind. And then he addressed Venerable Ananda in verse. I've got a burning desire for pleasure. My mind is on fire. Please, out of compassion, Gautama, tell me how to quench the flames. Now, he's called Gautama because he's of the same family as the Buddha. It's the family name, Gautama. Please tell me how to quench the flames. So Venerable Ananda says, your mind is on fire because of a distortion of perception. That's exactly what we're working with. Turn away from the feature of things that's attractive provoking lust. So you're seeing something that you're attracted to, and you need to stop paying attention to that. See all conditioned phenomena as other. It's not me, not mine, as suffering, as not self. Extinguish the great fire of lust. Don't burn up again and again. So here Ananda is bringing in the bigger picture. Like, how many times are you going to go through this? In this life, lifetime after lifetime. Isn't it enough already? With the mind unified and serene. So meditate on the ugly aspects of the body. With mindfulness immersed in the body, be full of disillusionment. So, that's seeing in these sequences that the Buddha gives about what leads up to samadhi. And then at the point when the samadhi is there, the stillness of mind comes to a certain depth, we see the way things actually are. That's the turning point from the samatha or samatha meditation to vipassana. It's not like you're doing anything. This idea that we do vipassana, okay, well, I understand the methods, but really the real insights and the real the wisdom that arises comes automatically out of samadhi. So there's samadhi first in this case, and then insight. And what's the insight? It's an insight into the way things actually are. So when you're unified, your mind is serene, it's calm, it's unified, it's not moving, it's still. And then you bring in the imagery of the body, particularly the inside of the body. And then when the mind is actually taking the body as an object of concentration, an object of focus, you're immersed in the body. You're really kind of, might almost say, feeling it. It's like there's a real attention to it, a calm attention. And then you become disillusioned or dispassionate towards the body. Sometimes they use the word disenchantment, but I think disillusionment is better. And then he says, meditate on the signless. And I've got a little note there. This is something that comes out of the commentary, equating this signless or animitta. This is an opposite of getting a nimitta or a sign. And the commentator equates it with insight, with vipassana. So because, and he says it's because it strips away all the signs of permanence, etc. You're just like really in the stillness without any visualization. You're like there's no like sign. You give up the underlying tendency to conceit. Now this is huge. This is like enlightenment. You're no longer relating to things as a self, as I am, not even that very subtle conceit that I am. And when you comprehend, you really understand conceit, you really understand this perception of self, so then you will live at peace. So all of these, we've kind of been seeing this all along, all of these distortions in perception come out of the sense of self. When that sense of self dissolves, or we see through it with wisdom, with insight, then there's peace and contentment. So we know when we're seeing something in a distorted way, it's we're disturbed and there's suffering. Any questions? Just feel free to raise your hand anytime if you have anything to say. So now this poem, also kind of a short or medium-ish size, short really, poem, 5 verses. It's from the Bhikkhuni Sundarinanda. And I've taken Ayya Soma's translation. She's translated the Therigatha, the verses of the enlightened nuns. And Nanda, Sundari means beautiful. There's a beautiful Nanda, Nanda. And she was the Buddha's half sister. So she was one of the children of Mahapajapati. I think she's younger than the Buddha, but according to some sources, I think her brother was maybe even older than the Buddha. I'm not sure, but anyhow, he had a half brother and a half sister. And this is his half sister. And the commentary says that when the many women from the Buddha's clan came to be ordained as bhikkhunis, she went along, not so much because she wanted to become a bhikkhuni, but because she wanted to be with her other family members. But then she really got into it. And part of how she got into it, she was very, very beautiful, and she was very aware of that. And she was really into being beautiful. And she really, really, what I want to say, cherished that quality. And the commentary says that the Buddha, through his psychic powers, made it possible for her to see a vision of herself. So she's young, and she sees her own self aging, and the whole process, like a time-lapse photography, her body changing and aging and becoming old. And this was such a powerful image for her. And the Buddha was telling her, Nanda, see this body as diseased, impure, and rotten. Cultivate awareness of the unattractive with a well-collected, one-pointed mind, or well-collected, still mind. As this is, so is that. As that is, so is this. Now that can be a little hard to, like, what does that mean? In one of the translations, in the Gyanananda translation, he puts in both this body and a dead body are the same. But that's really what the meaning is here. It's like when your body's dead and your body the way it is now, it's still got the same stuff. What is in the dead body is also in this body. Think of it like that. Only fools enjoy the vile smell of rotten limbs. I looked at it in this way. So now that was what the Buddha was saying to her. Now she's saying, I looked at it in this way relentlessly. By day and by night, saw it for myself with wisdom, and I had a breakthrough. I heedfully investigated the origin of things to accurately see this body inside and out. Then I was disenchanted by the body, and I became dispassionate, heedful, unbound. I am quenched and at peace, which is another way of saying that she's enlightened. And the master teachers really emphasize this deep reflection on the nature of the body, as the Buddha did. And he starts, the Satipatthana Sutta, or the Maha said both, Maha Satipatthana Sutta, with the emphasis on this kind of investigation of the body with mindfulness. And we're going to actually look at that sutta tomorrow night, because I think it's the most, it's a good time after this discussion tonight to really look deeply into that first foundation or aspect or method, you might say, of mindfulness, how we investigate the body. This is also something I've been doing a lot in my own practice. Because the last trip to Thailand, I talked to two different Kruba ajahns, teachers, and they spontaneously told me that this is what I should be doing now. And it really is helpful. It's really an amazing area of investigation. And we also have a planned trip to Body Worlds down in San Jose for anybody who's local. If you want to let us know you want to come along. And I think that is March 10th. Yay, March 10th. So coming up. We're just everybody's gonna buy their ticket and just, wander around the exhibit down there at the Tech Museum in San Jose. And I find that material very, very helpful. The plastinization, something like that, a way of preserving the actual human bodies, or bodies of animals sometimes too, or their human bodies, and seeing the real inside, what it's like, and then being able to take that into meditation and reflect on what's actually inside the body. That we carry around with us all the time. We don't really know what's in there, how it looks. And sometimes when we reflect on the body in this way, we can get a sense of how it's doing, how it feels. And recently I heard a talk by Ajahn Brahm where he said, someone suggested something about him maybe getting a checkup at the doctor. He said, well, I had a checkup just this morning. I mean, he said, I know this body so well, and go into do meditation and you kind of know what's happening in there. And this is something that master meditators actually develop quite a lot of skill with, to be able to really, really experience their body, what's really happening inside the body. Yes, Matthew? Matthew, did you raise your hand? No? Okay.
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Thanks for your patience in answering my questions. I just have a point of clarification from my last question. I think I had some insight just now into this particular practice. It seems that the idea is to be ever present in the moment and to be aware of the fact that what drives us and moves us is maybe towards senses that are pleasurable. We have contact. We do things for comfort. We get cold, we put a blanket on. We want to surround our houses with nice things to look at. We want a good life. And so moving towards these pleasures that may give us some temporary satisfaction will eventually not be pleasurable. And to pay attention to the body and its actual feelings towards what draws us towards what's pleasurable. And if we can be objective about that, then we can find the stillness of the mind in it. If I'm articulating that, I think that's
beautiful. Yes. Beautiful.
Okay, good. And
yes,
then
and
the second part, though, I think I'm trying to express, and I maybe this is a better way to say it, is that when we're not in the present, we may be dwelling on the past, and for whatever reason, our minds tend to gravitate towards maybe more negative things, or things we could have done better, or we should do better, or we're going to do one day. And that can create that feeling of aversion. And that's also worth investigation in the body and an opportunity to try and dispel that and move towards that stillness as well. Is that accurate?
yes, and the Buddha talks about, letting go of the past. There's, and other master teachers do too. It's like, let go of the past. There's nothing to really be gained. We think we're going to learn something, but maybe we learn a little bit by, looking at some way that we spoke or acted or thought and changing it. But beyond that, the looking into the past and like, oh, I had it and now I don't have it, or oh, I want that again, or I could have done this, or all of that stuff is toxic. it's really, it's more than unhelpful. It brings suffering. And, the Buddha cautioned us again and again to really be mindful of our mental states, be mindful of our thoughts, be mindful to know, why am I putting the causes and conditions in for this aversion to arise? So it can go either way, thinking about the past. We can have aversion, like you said, especially, I think some of it is culturally conditioned to look back and feel guilty, or to look back and feel like we made a mistake in 2020 hindsight, I should have done this, or I should have said that, or whatever. But and also looking to the future, to want something to happen in the future, to want to become. Every bit of it is about self. And of course, we don't want to be harsh with ourselves, because we're living in these bodies, in this context, in the world, and we have all this conditioning. So it's not like we should be upset with ourselves for our misperceptions and clinging and craving and all of that, but to know that it's harmful, to know that it's downpulling. And it's like you said, how can we come to this peace and tranquility, this equanimity about all of that, understanding it in a larger context? This craving for comfort, this craving for things that are nice, there's no end to it. It doesn't get satisfied. This craving to be rid of stuff, this craving to get past somehow the unpleasantness of life, there's no end to that either. And if we can really take that in, we can be happy, even though all this other stuff is going on. And I've known people who, major things happen to them. They get some terminal diagnosis and they're fine. How's that happen? It's because they put their energy into seeing things the way they are, and they recognize the joy of the Dhamma, the joy of the spiritual life, the joy of what's beyond this material world. And the Buddha wasn't talking about heaven either. He's like, yeah, heaven's a whole lot better than some things, but what we really want to do is see so clearly that we don't crave anything, that we really become quenched. It's a beautiful word, that our thirst for life, for love, for everything is quenched, and we're at peace. Now, of course, we also have like boundless love at that point. There's no limit to love and compassion and joy over goodness and equanimity. And it's like, yeah, once we can look beyond, look realistically at what's at hand, mindfully present, paying attention, seeing what the results are of clinging and craving, whether it's pulling things towards us or pushing things away, and then becoming free of it all. This is the point.
Thank you.
Matthew. So now this one is by Venerable Nyanananda, and it's Subha Bhikkhuni. Now this is a long one, but it's a great story. I did sprinkle in some translation from some other sources, but it's mostly Venerable Nyanananda. Now, get ready for a good story. This is not quite your bedtime story yet, but on one occasion, the nun Subha was going to the delightful Jivaka mango grove. So she's a bhikkhuni and she goes to meditate in the grove, the forest. Then suddenly a rogue, that's a bit of a dated word, but you get the picture, appeared and stood blocking her way. Subha said this to him: "What wrong have I done to you that you should stand here blocking my way? It is not fitting, sir, that a man should touch a nun." So he's like grabbed her arm or something. He's like Okay. She says, I deeply respect the Buddhist path. The Sublime One has taught us about the precepts. I protect those precepts purely. I am taintless. So she's enlightened. I am without any defilements. So why are you standing here blocking me? Your mind is dirty and my mind is pure. You're a defiled person and I am a taintless person with no lust. I'm liberated from every single defilement. So why are you standing here blocking me? And the man says, you're still young and you're not ugly. What good will nunhood do for you? Throw away your robe. Come, let's enjoy ourselves in this forest full of blooms. The blooming shrubs release a sweet smell in all directions with their pollen of their flowers. This is the beginning of spring and the weather is very comfortable. Come, let us enjoy ourselves in this forest full of blooms. The trees with blossoming crests sway in the wind as if they were singing and dancing. You've entered this forest alone. What enjoyment is here for you? This fearful forest is inhabited by packs of predators and surrounded by cow elephants, agitated by rutting bulls. I mean, you know where his mind is, gee. In this frightening great forest, do you wish to walk alone without a companion? So he goes from let's try to entice her to let's scare her, you know. Your beauty is beyond compare. You're like a statue of gold decorated with the finest Kasi cloth. Oh, incomparable one, you shine with beauty like a decorated golden statue. You're like an angel in the Chittalata forest. The Chittalata forest is a heaven realm forest. I'm dazzled by your beauty. If we both were to live together in this forest, I would devote my life to you. Uh-huh. Oh, you have crystal clear, shining eyes like that of an angel. There's no other person dearer to me than you. If you will grant my bidding, come and live happily with me in my house. I will offer you my luxurious palace and servant girls who will always attend to your needs. And then you'll wear kasi, the finest of all clothes, and you'll put on flowered garlands and perfumes, and I will make you many ornaments of gold and jewels and pearls. In that palace, there is a bed made of sandalwood with a comfortable mattress and a well-washed, beautiful coverlet. It is spread with a new, costly woolen quilt. You can sleep very peacefully on this fragrant bed. So why are you living this life of a nun? It's like a blue lotus lake possessed by a demon. Because of your celibate life, you will grow old with your limbs untouched by any man. And Suba says, what is it that you consider substantial here in this body, which is full of filth, filling the cemetery, and is destined to break up? What is it that you appreciate so much when you look at this body? He says, it's your eyes that I appreciate. Your eyes are extremely beautiful, like those of a doe, like those of a nymph who lives between mountains. When I see your eyes, my desire for sensual pleasures increases all the more. You're like a golden statue. The eyes in your face can be compared with the petals of a red lotus. By seeing your eyes, my desire for sensual pleasures increases all the more. You, the one with the big eyes, you, the one with the pure gaze, no eyes are dearer to me than yours. You're nymph, you nymph with pleasant eyes. Even if you go far away, I shall always remember your eyes. And Suba says, no, you wish to go by the wrong path. You seek to have the moon as a toy. You wish to jump over Mount Meru. Understand me, the one you wish for is the daughter of the Buddha. It's like, you're not getting it anywhere with me, dude. In this world with the gods, nothing can arouse lust in me. I don't know what lust is anymore. By following the path of Nibbana, I've rooted out lust. Like sparks from a pit of a burning coals cooling down, like destroying a bowl of poison, I destroyed lust. By following the path to Nibbana, I have rooted out lust. You may seduce a woman who is not insightful or who hasn't seen the Buddha through the Dhamma, but not me. You bother me. You're bothering me. So I've realized the true nature of life. Whether I am insulted or praised or feel pleasure or pain, my mindfulness is well established. I have understood that all conditioned things are disgusting. My mind does not cling to anything at all. I'm a disciple of the Buddha. I travel in the vehicle called the Noble Eightfold Path. I have pulled out the dart of lust and destroyed the taints. My heart only delights in an empty hut. I have seen well-painted wooden puppets fastened by strings and sticks. They dance in various ways. If these strings and sticks are removed, thrown away, scattered, and broken into pieces, then there's no puppet in them whatsoever. In which part of them should one delight? This body is also like a puppet. It does not exist without supporting factors. As it does not exist without supporting factors, in which part of the body should one delight? Just as you see a picture painted on a wall of a woman colored with paints, if people mistake it for a real woman, it's because their perception is distorted. You are blind. You run after an empty thing, which is like an illusion placed before you by a magician. You run after a golden tree someone had in a dream. You are like playing in a puppet show in the midst of the people. These eyes are like little balls set in hollow sockets with a bubble in the middle smeared with tears. Inside these sockets, there are eye secretions, various sorts of tendons, and flesh rolled into balls. The pretty lady Suba was not attached to her eyes. With an unattached mind, Suba suddenly tore out one of her eyes, and she said, "Here, take this eye for yourself," and straight away she gave it to the man. Instantly, the rogue's lust ceased, and he begged her pardon. "O celibate nun, may you recover soon. Such a thing will not happen again. If one tries to attack a noble nun like this, it's like embracing a blazing fire. It's like grabbing a poisonous snake with your bare hands. That person won't gain any happiness. Please forgive me." Well, the nun was freed from the rogue and went to the excellent Buddha. The very instant she saw the one with great marks of the excellent merit, the Buddha, her eye was restored to its former condition. She gave him quite a teaching. I don't know if you've ever had that urge to rip out an eyeball and hand it to someone. I have to say, there was one point where I felt like I wish I could have. But some of us just don't have the chutzpah for that, I guess. Anyway, yeah. Any comments? Do you like how his lust ceased? Put a stop to that. Any comments or questions or thoughts? Okay. I think this might be our last one. I can't remember. This is the Bhikkhu Parasarya. The monk Parasarya was a meditator. When he was seated alone, secluded, these thoughts came into his mind. As a human, one should work for one's own benefit. He should act without harming others. What should be his duties? What should be his behavior? There's another translation that says that we should act for our own benefit and for the benefit of others. A human's sense bases can be used for their welfare or their harm. If one doesn't guard their senses, they will surely lead to harm. If one guards their senses, they will certainly lead to happiness. So that's interesting. It's not about not using our senses. It's about knowing how to use them. Therefore, the one who acts for his own good and the one who doesn't harm others should protect the faculties well and handle them properly. When one's eyes chase after beautiful forms, if one does not understand the danger of their unrestraint, they won't be able to escape from suffering. When one's ears chase after beautiful sounds, if one does not understand the danger of the unrestraint, they won't be able to escape from suffering. Not knowing about the removal of desire, if one smells things, being caught up with sweet fragrances, they won't be able to escape from suffering. If one recollects flavors, thinking this is bitter, this is sweet, and this is sour, their mind will be tied by craving for taste. They won't be able to understand the nature of this mind. Well, that's interesting. You won't be able to understand the nature of mind if you're caught up with the taste. If one recollects tangibles, so things that you touch, thinking this is lovely and is pleasant to touch, the mind will become attached to it. And as a result, when lust invades the mind, then we will have to suffer from various pains. When mind objects enter the mind, thoughts, if one is unable to guard the mind from those objects, they will have to suffer because of all of the five senses. This body is like a beautiful and attractive painted pot made by a skillful artist, but it's filled with pus, blood, and a lot of filth. Life is like something bitter with sweet enjoyment, a painful thing which has a pleasant attachment. The one who doesn't understand this lives like one who licks a razor smeared with honey. There's more to this verse, but I want to stop here. Yes, Holly.
So I'm familiar with this topic, but I'm having difficulty really relating to it. And here's a couple of strains of my thought. Would appreciate your comments. And I'm not unusual, I think, in feeling like to have to see the body as disgusting or vile. It seems a little extreme. And I grew up in Future Farmers of America and learned, and well, in a young age, slaughtered a variety of farm animals and saw lots of insides.
Yeah.
And I know what's in there. You grew up on a farm, ranch. And then also being the age that I'm at, I've seen a lot of things go wrong in bodies. And I don't feel ignorant of what the many ways the body can go south. And then the third one is that I've fallen in love several times in my life, and those people seem incredibly beautiful at that time and often for many years past. And so I kind of have trouble interpreting these teachings of the Buddha. I can see them related to young people full of lust, or people who don't realize that all things end. Your comments, please.
When you're reflecting on these experiences, there's mindfulness. And there is a tenderness, a sweetness, an acknowledgement that there is beautiful. There is the beautiful. I mean, what's beautiful about those people that you've loved? You know, it's their kindness, it's their gentleness, maybe it's their courage in overcoming various difficulties and defilements and so on, right? And that's the point. I mean, it's true that a lot of these verses are trying to really like get us to look at things we haven't looked at, if we haven't looked at them yet. Getting us to realize that in an unguarded moment, we might be caught off guard somewhere and kind of get caught up in something. And we get, just like in the other Vipallāsas, just like the other distortions of perception, we can tell when we're seeing things that are in a way that's not true to reality because we're suffering.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If we can truly see these things that you're describing in the true light, we won't suffer with it. And so every one of us, until we're fully enlightened, has some amount of effort to make and attention to put on the way things actually are. But I'm so glad you're bringing up the reality that, you know, it's not just about seeing what's ugly as ugly, but it's also about seeing what's beautiful as beautiful. What are those beautiful qualities that we care about and cherish, that are good to reflect on and good to remember and good to care about? And, you know, it's not wrong to see the beauty of a rose in full bloom. It's just wrong to stop there. And so what you're talking about is not stopping there. I too, I grew up on a farm. When I was small, I saw sows giving birth to, like, you know, 10 little pigs, and one of them will be dead, come out dead, you know, or whatever. You see a lot. That little piglet gets scooped up with all of the manure and thrown in the manure spreader. You know, it's like there are so many ways in which we try to cover up the nature of life in our more kind of refined culture. And sometimes we need to come back to the reality that we need to anyway, if we want to wake up. And what does it cause? It doesn't cause us to be grumpy, you know, disillusioned. That's not what is meant by the disillusionment. It's not a like, oh, now I'm kind of down on life. You know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But it's to see the amazing potential we have as human beings. To see that we can look at things actually as they are and free ourselves from craving, free ourselves from aversion, free ourselves from delusion, and that it is up to us. We can't just catch it from someone else. Nobody else is going to do it for us. It can't be done that way. We've got to see it ourselves.
I'd love to hear some other comments from others. I can think of 2 examples in my life where I saw the beautiful as unbeautiful eventually. I stayed with the training of horses way long into my second marriage, to where it was detrimental to my partner relationship and stressful to stay in the number of hours and days working with horses. So I stopped at that level. On a more humorous note, I was thinking of my long fondness for Hershey's chocolate chips, which I usually have a big bag of in the pantry where I can conveniently walk by to get just a few more. And I just got my blood work for the year, and my cholesterol is ticked up, and my doctor says we need to talk. And I put the bag of chocolate chips in the very back of the pantry, and I haven't really had a craving for them, although that might be temporary. it just made me think of what it was doing, what those kind of fats were doing to the lining of my blood vessels and the effect that would have on my cardiovascular system, and that I had a choice that was really not that hard to make. I could fall off the wagon again, though.
Yeah, maybe a little bit won't, and then you'll think about it again. But that's it, right? How do we come to grips with the true nature of life? This is kind of like on a very practical level. Can we be ready for the changes that are inevitably going to come? And we don't know how or what, when, we don't know. But the body's going to pack up. And can we be happy and at peace with that? It's reminding me of the story Ajahn Brahm has told many times of when he was a young monk in Thailand and he got scrub typhus and he was super, super sick and wasn't sure what was going to happen, and he got put in a hospital. And he said the hospitals at that time in Northeast Thailand were not very good places to be. And, like really a lot of pain and suffering. And when Ajahn Chah came was going to come see him, he thought, oh, good, the master's coming to see me. A lot of you know this story. It gets told a couple of different ways. The way Ajahn Brahm, I've heard him tell it, he said, Ajahn Chah has said to him, Ramawangso, you're gonna get better or you're gonna die. You're gonna live through this or you're gonna die. And you've got to be at ease with both. And in Stillness Flowing, when Ajahn Jayasaro recounted this story, he said, you're going to get better or you won't. So a little gentler. But why be gentle? It's like Ajahn, I don't know how Ajahn Chah actually said it, but it was clear, you're going to get better or you're going to get worse. And getting worse is this other outcome. And you have to be at peace with both. So it's not like we can expect ourselves to automatically be at peace with both, accept the way things are right away. But if we have the Dhamma and the practice in our experience, then we can come to that pretty fast. We can work with it and be kind to ourselves the whole time. And the thing that's so fascinating about the more we see things as the way they really are, the more happy we become. And the more light and the more caring, the more loving we become. And so this is like, I would say the untaught ordinary person, the way it says in the sutta, is someone who's never encountered the Dhamma. And how our society conditions people, and what success means in the world, and how there's a lot of effort to try to avoid seeing death and being around it, or like trying to stave off any kind of failure of the body. And it's and then to take it, when it happens, to take it as the worst possible thing that could happen, that kind of thing. And sometimes I'll be observing, there are so many people, like just living on this street here, so many people, and they're all going to die. All of us are all going to die at some point. It's amazing we don't see more of this happening, right? I remember being in Bodh Gaya, and there's a parade of people carrying a body down the street. Everybody stops, puts their hands in Anjali. And even back in Indiana when I was growing up, the funeral procession, all the cars following a hearse to the cemetery. I just don't see that very much around here in the Bay Area in California. It's like body gets whisked away, it gets cremated maybe, and you have a nice celebration later with a nice photo of them when they were looking really good. And Are we really thinking about it? Are we touching into the sacredness of it all? The spiritual energy rising that comes sometimes when we're having some of this great change in life. Are we really, working with this material? Yeah, thank you for sharing, Holly. It's great. What are the challenges you find in this? How do you see mindfulness related to this? That wish of the monk for all the world being mindful all the time, mindful of the body. How do you see it? Yeah, Val?
Yeah, I love the last two lines of this verse that we're covering right now about licking the honey coated razor. And you're asking about mindfulness. That to me was such a visceral, evocative image of how keen our mindfulness should be, because the moment that we relax, we're gonna get our tongue just sliced open. So yeah, I love that image. I mean, it's a horrible image, but it's a great
Yeah,
image.
it really struck me as quite poignant too. It's like,
yeah, one can feel it almost.
Yeah.
And I think that is the level of keenness that we need to break through. That is the level of danger that we face. It's not a light thing to cut through all of this.
That's right. I agree. I mean, the delusion is really thick, and we're encouraged to engage in it all the time. And it takes that effort to keep coming back to reality, keep bringing the mind back to reality. Hey, look at this. Why are you so caught up in this other thing? What is so important about that? I mean, we get wrapped around the axle about all kinds of stuff in our life. And then, if we really take in the true nature of life, so much of that just doesn't matter. Just not important anymore. We don't have to be so upset with each other. We don't have to be so upset with ourselves. It's like, yeah, wow.
Yeah, there seems to be great freedom there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Val. Doug?
Thanks. Yeah, it's just such a challenge to, I feel like there've been really, really brief moments in my life where I've really understood it, where I've seen it clearly, but it's just it's so hard for it not to be an abstraction. And I mean, part of that's my mind fleeing from it. Part of it's that it just takes an enormous amount of stillness of the mind to see it clearly. But I guess that's the task. But man, it's just hard it's easy to talk about it for me. I'm getting older, and as Sarah always says, the cataracts are getting louder, but
Yeah.
that's just an abstraction. So anyways, just really, that's the practice, I guess, is to be still enough that you can see it clearly. But thank you.
Thank you, Doug. I think what's coming up as you say that for me is still enough and humble enough. You know, it's like the humility is the humility and the love for every living being is there when the sense of self starts to crumble. We let go of that. We let go of that facade, the face we put on to engage with others. And, you know, there's a incredible humility there, and a softness and a caring that doesn't have clinging with it. It's like, wow, that is so amazing. Yeah, Andrea.
I think it's been kind of a constant practice for me these days, and it's the like trying to make the ugly an ally in a way, to contemplate suffering in almost everything. Like yesterday I was kind of happy of buying myself some sunblock because I get exposed a lot to sun because of my job, and but then I was like, it's great, you know, I'm doing something good for myself and it's very nice, but it's so expensive. So there's always something, you know, like I'm happy about something, or I see something I like, or I taste something I like, and then I'm like, but there's this thing that doesn't make it perfect, and it's great, like it's the nature of it. So yeah, it's been very helpful to kind of put some distance between me and the object I attach some happiness to.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not like we're discouraged from being happy in the Dhamma. It's discouragement from being happy with things that aren't going to lead to happiness. You know, it's like be happy with the things that do lead to happiness, and then really the happiness is rich and deep, and you know, it's also fleeting in us until we're really awake. But it's you know, you can get a sense of the authenticity of it, and it's always there. There's always something to be happy about and to see the beauty in, you know, acts of kindness and generosity, you know, any kind of application of wisdom or confidence and virtue and goodness, you know. So there's always something, you know, and you see it even more sometimes when we're in those dire straits. So powerful. Yeah, Deborah?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hi. I feel like I struggle more with seeing the beautiful.
Mhm.
I already see plenty of the ugly.
Mhm.
I'm more of the, I guess, the aversive type. Um, and I, you know, I feel like I look for it more now. The, you know, the qualities of like the Brahma Viharas and generosity and such. But
Mhm.
it feels like it's in short supply. I mean, outside of the Buddhist communities.
Mhm.
Um, and this is where I struggle. I had a strange day where I got a like a scam phone call, but it was a really scary one, and I was on it for like 10 or 15 minutes until I could actually figure out that it was a scam. But then after I got off the phone, I called the police, and she said, "Oh, we got a lot of calls from people today getting that same scary scam call."
Mhm.
So I went on to Nextdoor, the app that people in neighborhoods have to warn people about this. I was hoping like, oh, I hope somebody will see this and then they will avoid getting involved in this scary conversation. And then 2 people responded with mean comments.
Oh,
And I wound up taking it down, and I thought, oh, okay, I thought I was doing something nice. But
hmm.
yeah, that was one of those things where I'm like, oh, okay, where where is some of that, the goodness, these good qualities? Is it just only supposed to be within myself? Like I'm just relying on myself for these types of things, or
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're bringing this up because, of course, our mental states are conditioned. We're all dealing with whatever mind we've got and whatever conditioning we have. And so, yes, for many people, it's much more, instead of being attracted to things, it's much more about being averse to things and sad, maybe, or frightened, or like this kind of maybe even sometimes hopelessness, or whatever those negative mental states are. And it's so important to surround yourself with good people. And when I mean say good people, it's like the Buddha will say this person's a bad person, and I always kind of go, no, you don't say they're a bad person. They do bad things, but they're not bad people. Kind of like. But I get what the point is. If we're doing bad things, we're creating problems for the people around us, and it's so important to find people with wisdom and virtue. And I mean, the Buddha talks about those 4 qualities of faith, generosity, virtue, and wisdom that often he talks about together, and how important it is to find people who can, we can see that in them. And a lot of that generosity needs to be turned inwards, so that we recognize that those qualities do exist in us and in others, even when they're covered over quite significantly with some of the other people with their own conditioning. And it's really challenging sometimes to see past the negativity and past the unwholesome actions and speech that you hear and see, and to recognize that there's a story there. There's something wrong, something happened to them, and who knows, those people who responded in a negative way, it's hard to kind of imagine knowing that you were trying to help people, but maybe there's just so much fear and negativity and yeah. And I don't know what kind of scary call it was, but I know when my mom was getting older, she'd get these they and the ones that really scared her were the ones where they act like it's one of her grandchildren and they're in jail, or they were in an accident and they need money and how to get the money. And thank goodness we removed the possibility of her being able to use her own money by that point, because she was really, really scrambling to try to figure out how to send these people money. And she called me up and she said, I'm not supposed to tell you about this, but I was like, oh my God. No way. She was so upset. And it was so, I mean, talk about the karma that people are making. Oh man, to do things like this, I feel sorry for them. And yeah, so all the things the Buddha encouraged, surrounding ourselves with people who are virtuous and kind and trustworthy, good friends. In the Sigalika Sutta, the ones who are good friends, not the ones who are bad friends. And yeah, I know that there's a lot of goodness in all kinds of places, not just in our Dhamma groups, but we certainly have a lot of it here. Which is, I'm so, like, sometimes I tell people I love my job because I'm surrounded by so many good people. And even if there's other things going on in their lives, they're on their best behavior when they're around me. And, you know, it's like, it's so great. So, you know, we can hopefully do what we can do to find encouragement from the people around us and from the situations that we can try to put ourselves into. So yeah, and again, this understanding that the aversion is just as much of an inhibitor as the craving, as the desire for something, the desire to get rid of, and that's kind of see in the dark side, yeah, in as a distortion. Is also really needs to be cared for, and just to accept them, like I said, accept the mind that we have and apply the medicine that the Buddha offers, because he's got like so many tools, and if we can, you know, learn how to use them, we can get past these defilements. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Deborah.
Thank you.
Carolyn?
Thank you. Yeah, I've been sitting here feeling a little confused about it because I feel like I see a lot of beauty everywhere. Like, okay, well, just to backtrack, growing up, I was the person who wasn't grossed out by things, and I would bandage up, you know, anybody who was bleeding, or I was the crisis person, you know, the person who could handle any whatever. It's like, oh, you got into a fight or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And none of those things ever bothered me. And, you know, I was always like my mom is grossed out by everything. And so if there was a rat or a bird that got into the house or anything, like it was always me that sort of dealt with it.
Yeah.
And I worked a lot of jobs where like I was with animals, and you know, there's poop and pee and
Yeah.
vomit, and it's like that's just how it is, you know, and it's like it doesn't gross me out.
Mhm.
And on the other hand, like, oh, and I worked with elderly folks, and I felt like I sort of found my niche because they were all so beautiful to me.
Yeah.
They were, you know,
Mhm.
and it's like, you know, the gentleman who learned how to dance at the Fred Astaire dance studio, and he was still such a lovely dancer, and I got so much joy from watching him dance at the senior center. And
Mm.
so it confuses me. Like I look on the screen, and like everybody here, whenever I'm here, I'm always like sort of it's like Holly described, you know, you fall in love with somebody and
Mhm.
you just think they're so beautiful. I mean, I feel that way about everybody here, you know, and it's like every time I'm in a meditation thing, it's like, can we just not like close it down because I want to stare into everybody's faces? I mean, maybe that sounds weird, but it's like, it's sort of like being in love, you know, it's like, I just love everyone, you know?
It's great.
And so I don't get it. Like, I feel like I'm confused. Am I just,
Oh, but you remember lust, don't you?
yes, I do
Having
remember. Yeah,
lust. Do you
yes.
remember having that like you're not really in love with the person, you're just in love with lust? Have you ever had that experience? I've had that experience. I've had it in the past. I know how deluded we can be. I know how we can misperceive. Like that one verse is where he says, you know, when they make fun of my appearance, they don't know me. When they get so taken carried off by my voice, they don't know me. So it's like, I think we can probably all recognize or remember, recall, or maybe we're experiencing any time when we're not seeing clearly the way things are. You know, it's like, it's wonderful that we can see the beauty in people, when, you know, the beautiful qualities. It's wonderful that we can see that in each other and see it in ourselves. You know, but this is where the spiritual life is. The beautiful qualities in us are the ones that are really, you know, on that continuum to awakening. And that's wonderful to see that. To see, you know, and even if we like I think one of the retreats you were actually at, let me see, I don't think this person is present. There was an older fellow who got pretty grumpy with us about the sound system, and wrote a kind of a energetic note about it. And I got the biggest kick out of it because, I mean, we wanted, of course, to make the sound system work so that he could hear what's going on. It's not like we took that lightly, but the part that was cute was that Ayya Chitananda was just so like delighted with this guy's grumpiness. And we decided he was just grumpy enough to be endearing. You know, so even, you know, like it was sweet. I mean, it's and we can see beyond the ugliness. And that's beautiful. And that's good. It's like we have to have the distinction between the false beauty and the true beauty. We have to have the distinction between the false ugliness and the true ugliness. And our defilements are ugly. They're selfish. And they encourage us to do the wrong things. And that's ugly. It's ugly when we're not honest. It's ugly when we're not generous, stingy, and all those human, you know, things that are also part of our conditioning. So this is about seeing the way things actually are. And when we see those beautiful qualities in a person of any age, and when we see those things in ourselves, and we see the way the Dhamma cures us, that's beautiful. It does uplift the heart. And that's great. Thank you for sharing that, Kirtland.
Thank you, Ayya. And that helps. I mean, I know what you mean. I mean, like, you know, especially when I was younger and I would objectify people when I didn't even know them, you know.
Yeah.
It's like they would be a beautiful person and I would see them, they would catch my eye. So yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
It's just like, I was just thinking like, am I deluded? Because like I look at everyone and you're all so beautiful.
But you know, I'm reading a book on how to be an anti-racist, and you know, like the conditioning that any or all of us have around racism. We're not seeing the way things actually are. There's all kinds of different ways. It can be deeply embedded, stuff we haven't uprooted yet. And we have this opportunity to really look, to really change. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for this time together these last 4 weeks.